In addition to crazy combos, tricky movement, and mind games that reveal fragments of a player's psyche as a match progresses, part of why the fighting game genre has been kicking for well over 35 years is due to its colourful characters. No matter where you look, a tsunami of karate men, dinosaurs, robots, demons, ninja turtles, anime girls, and even sentient sandbags will swallow you whole if you fall in love with the genre. But as you would know from clicking on this video, we're not here to talk about any of that. Instead, we'll be analysing a man who, in the name of justice, will fight until the sun goes down, even when the odds are brutally stacked against him. Working his way through the trials and tribulations of being a low tier in a highly competitive food chain, Ace Attorney Phoenix Wright is here to persecute ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3's evildoers, one conviction at a time.
Objection!
Before we begin, a massive shout out goes to Super Combo Wiki and the official Marvel 3 guidebook for their excellent information. I couldn't have made this video without their learning materials, so please give them your support.
In battle, it's not a question of guilty or not guilty.
If you're one of the many fans of Capcom's Gyakuten Saiban, or Ace Attorney, then you'll be familiar with Phoenix Wright and his adventures, but for those who have never experienced his series, I'll provide a brief recap. Put simply, Phoenix Wright is a novice defense attorney who often finds himself in seemingly unwinnable cases, but with the power of luck, a strong work ethic, and hyper-specific recounts of time, he's known for clawing victory from the jaws of defeat. When out of the courthouse, Phoenix partners with his friend Maya, the younger sister of his mentor Mia, to investigate crime scenes and attempt to make sense of all of the madness. Other figures like rival attorney Miles Edgeworth, clumsy police detective Dick Gumshoe, and longtime friend Larry Butts make reoccurring appearances throughout the series' 6 mainline entries. Despite tackling themes of criminality and Japan's overwhelming conviction rate, Ace Attorney keeps a lighthearted tone throughout its cases, with Phoenix Wright usually being front and center of it all. With that said, it's important to note that Phoenix himself has 0 combat abilities, and even if he did have these, his somewhat square personality would prevent him from acting on them. As Ace Attorney is a visual novel where you enact justice through persuasion and irrefutable evidence, Mr. Wright truly has the gift of the gab, but when you're up against devil hunters and succubi, I'm not sure if talking things over will end well. Also, you only ever see Phoenix during the courtroom segments, as all other forms of gameplay are presented from a first-person point of view. When making an effort to include Phoenix in 2010's Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, the company couldn't figure out how to accurately represent him, with an initial idea being to chain him to his desk, preventing him from moving freely. Thankfully, Capcom was able to jump over this hurdle for Marvel vs. Capcom, and as you now know what Phoenix Wright is all about, let's explore his playstyle. When Phoenix is on the battlefield, you'll immediately notice a unique HUD at the bottom of the screen. This displays his collected evidence, and with 3 pieces of good evidence, he can enter the iconic Turnabout mode by landing an objection. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, so let's back up a little. The most basic of Phoenix Wright's strategies is to stay far away from the enemy to collect evidence. When the magnifying glass is on the HUD, this means he's in investigation mode, which is all about securing data. Pressing the launcher and one of 3 attack buttons corresponds to an evidence slot, with the goal being to find evidence as quickly as possible. If Phoenix finds a piece of good evidence, then he can keep it, but if the evidence is past its expiry date, then he can throw it towards the enemy, damaging them if it connects. The type of evidence you receive is completely determined by RNG, so you just have to hope and pray for good luck when taking the time to search. If you need some backup, Maya can come in and hold up an energy shield that keeps Phoenix protected. If the opponent attempts to strike him, their attacks will be absorbed by Maya, allowing him to counterattack for a combo. Maya can also be used as a solo OTG combo extender, but with how you have to wait for her to physically travel across the screen, this doesn't always reach in time. When Phoenix is satisfied with his collected evidence, he can enter trial mode, allowing him to put these items to good use. His normals change too, having more sophisticated animations and slightly higher damage, although Maya is put out to pasture. Instead of relying on his old friend, Phoenix can now throw papers to keep the enemy at bay and walk them down for a soft knockdown. With good evidence in your possession, pressing their allocated button combinations will activate them when grounded. The cell phone summons 3 stationary projectiles that travel towards the enemy's coordinates. The documents result in a close-range projectile that explodes on contact. The flower vase shoots out a fireball in an arc, making it useful for covering aerial space. The knife functions like a shotgun in that the projectiles spread out as they travel. The photo leads to a horizontal beam. The watch is a small projectile that also travels horizontally. And using bad or no evidence does, well, nothing. These pieces of evidence are far from being useless, and you would be leaving a lot of damage and screen control on the table by ignoring their distinctive ranges. With assists in the back, Phoenix can control a variety of angles that many characters like to travel through, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. A grounded forward heavy or aerial down heavy in either form will fill up an invisible stun gauge, and if it's maxed out, the enemy becomes dizzy, indicated by this blue effect. Stunned opponents remain defenseless for 2 seconds, and if they enter a knockdown state this way, Phoenix can easily OTG with whatever attack he chooses. However, if an attack that would fill up the stun gauge on hit is blocked, it's reset to 0, forcing Phoenix to start all over again. It's not all bad though, as Steel Samurai Maya Smelting is a close-range super that leaves Phoenix at plus 57 on block. The final hit where Maya trips over is a low, so if Phoenix throws out an overhead, this becomes unblockable, and if it kills, you have plenty of time to search for evidence. Order in the Court is Phoenix's final level 1, and it can only be performed in trial mode. Everyone's favorite judge swings his mighty gavel down, striking both fighters, although Phoenix thankfully doesn't take any damage. This super hits OTG and is great for starting DHC routes, with the recovery portion being made shorter through X Factor. Finally, and this is what the entire courtroom has been waiting for, with 3 pieces of evidence, Phoenix can enter Turnabout mode. His range, damage, and combos are far deadlier than before, with Maya unblockables being so easy that he can do them in his sleep. Jumping Heavy is an overhead ground bounce, Crouching Heavy is a wall bounce, and his specials hit like a truck. Heavy Break the Witness demolishes life bars, and if the enemy is conditioned to block, throwing out paper will result in decent chip damage. Making things even better is Ace Attorney, which is probably the best level 3 in the whole game. If the opponent isn't blocking when the cinematic begins, they will get hit, guaranteed. On top of this, it does 600,000 damage. Adding X Factor into the mix makes all of this even more potent, and at this point, it's quite obvious that Phoenix Wright has been promoted from a humble defense attorney to a beast. Activating Turnabout mode is Phoenix's primary goal, so you should build a team around him that allows this to quickly take place. By now, you might be under the assumption that our spiky-head friend is quite the fighter, but he's actually never been considered to be very strong. As such, we should explore his drawbacks, and oh boy, are there plenty of them. Okay, where do I begin? Writing down all of Phoenix Wright's weaknesses in detail would lead to more paperwork than the average court case, so I'll try to keep things brief. Like I mentioned in my low tiers video from eons ago, Phoenix Wright is a keep-away character with minimal keep-away tools. What I mean by this is that aside from Maya Shield, which by the way has no damage scaling, Phoenix himself can't use anything special to run away. He can't double jump, teleport, fly, or air dash, and his wave/plank dashes aren't that great either. This leads to an over-reliance on assists to keep the enemy at bay instead of Phoenix being able to do this himself, and it makes it easy for enemies to rapidly approach him. Summoning Maya and staying directly in the shield might work against physical hits, but throws will scoop Phoenix out of it. As many common top tier fighters can confirm throws into full combo routes from anywhere on the screen, you can never be too careful when staying towards the front of the barrier. If he's being locked down in the corner, there are no solid panic tools to use, as outside of his snapback, Phoenix's normals are slow to start up and have poor range. Even if you do manage to land a counter hit, his solo combos do well below average damage, so the risk reward is never really in his favor. Your goal here should be to escape the corner and return to mid-screen, but this is easier said than done. Again, his movement options suck, especially when his back is to the wall. Going back to Phoenix's normals for a moment, their ability to start combos works decently enough when he lands a hit, but moving to this position in the first place is a real challenge. Just by looking at these attacks, you can tell that their range leaves much to be desired, and to make matters worse, his only lows are Crouching Light and Heavy. The former has pitiful range with 7 startup frames, and the latter has 11 startup frames. If you try to use this move when in trial mode, it turns into a mid, meaning Crouching Light is his only universal low. Even turnabout moves that look like lows still hit mid, meaning Phoenix has to rely on this stubby attack to swipe at their legs. As a spectator, I've seen so many players panic when he's in turnabout and duck out of instinct, leading them to be hit by an aerial combo starter, but there's no reason for them to do this from a distance, honestly. Phoenix's lack of mid-range high-low mix-ups means that his opponents can confidently block high from most ranges, and when he gets close, his overhead command normal can be reacted to. This move isn't too bad on hit as it can be cancelled into a super or X Factor, but experienced players will be familiar enough with the matchup to anticipate its usage. As a support character now, Phoenix isn't the worst teammate to have, but he's certainly not the best. Maya Smelting and Order in the Court will fail to catch enemies from a distance, with the latter only being available as a DHC route when Phoenix is in trial mode. As his alpha counters have little to no invincibility, they'll often be beaten out by multi-hitting strikes. Paperwork and Press the Witness are his first two assists, with both of them receiving buffs when in Turnabout, and Get a Missile being his final assist. The lovable Shiba Inu runs along the screen to hit low, as well as OTGing grounded opponents. When combined with the right point character, you can use this for unblockable resets during combos, if you can get around the startup. Because of how variable the assist's frame data can be, it's hard to guarantee consistent successful usage, but players like Aeonian have proven how useful it can be with Spencer. As a fun fact, what you might not know is that in version 1.0 of Ultimate, the first two assists had startup invincibility, but this was patched out of the game shortly after its release. I don't know why Capcom felt it necessary to nerf Phoenix Wright of all characters, but that's the world we live in. Oh yeah, before I forget, I mentioned before that his evidence is RNG based, and I would like to go into more detail. As finding 3 of these is necessary for Turnabout mode, you can be royally screwed over if the game just doesn't cooperate with you. Sometimes you'll keep getting bad evidence over and over and over, and when you have all sorts of stuff flying in your direction, this can be super frustrating. I believe returning to the character select screen can quote-unquote reset the game's RNG algorithm, but this is more of a band-aid fix, with the band-aid being one of those really flimsy ones that comes off easy. Also, as key moves are locked behind investigation and trial modes, Phoenix never has access to all his moves at once. This means he'll have to repeatedly switch between these forms as the match progresses, and with 20 recovery frames, bad timing can easily lead to big punishment. Finally, as devastating as Turnabout mode is, the clock is always ticking away in the background, and after 22 seconds, it's gonna end. At this point, Phoenix is back to square one and must recollect all of his evidence. Compared to Frank West, who gets to permanently keep his win condition, this is a huge blow to Phoenix's long-term threat factor, but to be honest, I actually prefer it this way. There are so many instances in Ace Attorney where Phoenix thinks he's got enough evidence to win the case free, but then something crazy pops up out of nowhere to throw a wrench into his plans. Running out of Turnabout mode in Marvel is completely different in terms of gameplay functionality to when it happens in Ace Attorney, but it provides players with the same path to victory, which is extremely clever. It's a brilliant way to make Marvel vs. Capcom, a high-intensity fighting game, feel like Ace Attorney, a very deliberate visual novel, which is something only Phoenix Wright can do. With all of that out of the way, Phoenix is far from a lost cause, as although he may be a low tier, there are still some commendable qualities within his toolkit. Without question, the biggest strength Phoenix has access to is Turnabout mode. I know I spoke about the hurdles preventing players from entering this form, but if you do manage to access it, the match's momentum immediately shifts in your favor. Basic Turnabout combos possess far greater damage and meter build than what Phoenix normally has access to, fueling his team members going forward. All it takes to kill a character is a tricky overhead or mid-screen whiff punish, with routes like this becoming even deadlier with meter. When doing battle against fighters who struggle against zoning, Phoenix's 3 pieces of evidence can be used in tandem to keep them at bay, with Turnabout boosting their effects. Normally, you have to wait for one animation to finish before committing to another one, but the install lets you cancel their recovery into each other. Having partners in the back with good screen control creates an almost impregnable wall that the opponent must climb over to reach Phoenix, which, I'm sure you can tell, is easier said than done. Many of his long-range buttons can combo into themselves in the corner, so even if you're still learning advanced sequences and you aren't quite confident in your execution, you can always rely on these easy yet high-damage alternatives. Activating X Factor makes these victories even faster, as Phoenix receives a 35% damage boost in level 1. Even if you haven't activated Turnabout mode yet, a buff of this caliber goes a long way to alleviate Phoenix's damage issues, so you'll want to make good use of it when appropriate. A 60% and 85% damage boost belongs to level 2 and level 3 X Factor respectively, along with a 5, 10 and 15% speed boost for all levels. When struggling to find good evidence, Order in the Court's property of Vanishing Bad Evidence will be your best friend, and this super is invincible on startup. If you time this super incorrectly, the opponent can't punish Phoenix until he's flat on the ground, even with an X Factor guard cancel. He's obviously a sitting duck in this position, but characters without meterless OTGs can struggle to quickly attack him, so depending on the matchup, this isn't too bad, I guess? If you're outside of throw range, Maya Shield is a solid defense tool that can take up to 250,000 points of damage. Avoiding this move when low on evidence is a death sentence, as this is your only way of installing a barrier between you and the opponent without an assist. Even if they overcome the Herculean efforts of this poor teenage girl, Phoenix's health value of 1 million life points will lead to him surviving many solo combos. He's far from being invincible, but 1 million health isn't anything to frown upon. A minor, yet underrated part of Phoenix's evidence that I quite like is the slab of meat he can sometimes find. Unlike other bad pieces of evidence where you're forced to throw it away, the meat is automatically consumed once found, restoring 150,000 points of red life in the process. If you're lucky enough to find multiple protein sources in a short period, you can restore a respectable chunk of life in the blink of an eye. It wouldn't be accurate for me to claim something like Phoenix's strengths far outweighing his weaknesses or anything like that, but it's clear to see by now that it's not all horrible. In fact, a few talented players have taken Phoenix Wright, flaws and all, to the summit of Marvel. With the meta of Marvel mostly revolving around the undisputed top tiers, there have been far fewer players who have proven their loyalty to Phoenix Wright. The big one is Justice, an American player who runs a team of Captain America, Phoenix Wright, and Doctor Strange. On a surface level, this looks like an odd team with minimal synergy, but there's much more to it than you would think. When Phoenix is looking for evidence, Charging Star is a fast get-off-me tool, and Eye of Agamotto acts as a shield that can cover his tracks. Combining this with Maya Shield makes it even harder for enemies to claw at Phoenix, going a long way in helping him reach Turnabout mode. When he's in Turnabout, Captain America can lock the enemy down with Hypercharging Star and safely DHC into Maya Smelting for guaranteed unblockables. One of my favourite Phoenix Wright matches is Justice vs F-Champ at Absolute Battle 7, where Phoenix Wright uses the power of deduction to take down Jean Grey and win the game, sending F-Champ to the losers bracket. This entire set, from beginning to end, perfectly demonstrates the highs and lows of Phoenix Wright when up against a top tier team, and I highly recommend checking it out. Other players like Lythero have created over a decade's worth of Marvel 3 content on YouTube, and his Phoenix Wright is always a joy to watch. Both Dante and Beautiful Joe can use assists and DHC routes to buy Phoenix time to collect evidence, and although this team is far from perfect when you strictly look at things through the lens of high-level competition, it's awesomely unique. Wolf Street, Aeonian, Viet Champ, B-Man, and Ugly Wen are other experienced Phoenix Wright players, and if you're interested in seeing for yourself how he holds his own when played to near perfection, there are countless tournament matches online for you to watch. Specific tournament results are way harder to find, what with how many of them there have been over the past 15 years, but when looking at relevant majors and Tampa Never Sleeps brackets, there's a decent amount of spiky hair representation. Phoenix Wright never made it to an EVO top 8, but Justice came second at the aforementioned Absolute Battle 7, 4th at Frosty Faustings 10, and 6th at DreamHack Dallas 2023, with Aeonian going 7-2 at EVO 2023 to come in at 23rd place. I could keep reading out player statistics until the sun goes down, but I think you get the point by now. When talking about competition, the bottom line is that Phoenix Wright lacks the necessary tools to stand on his own against Marvel 3's more common fighters, but that doesn't mean he isn't trying. He's the perfect example of how a low tier can transform into something very, very scary when the stars align, and even the best players in the world have fallen victim to his convictions. The best characters in the game have ways to cancel their mistakes, rapidly traverse around the screen, be threatening from a variety of angles, even in the air, and quickly initiate touch of death combos, whereas Phoenix Wright has some paper and an RNG mechanic. That's not to say he's unusable, but he's never been a solid contender for bringing home a major tournament. As such, you'll be hard-pressed to find Phoenix within top 8 of a stacked tournament, especially nowadays where the meta has mostly been figured out. But with all of that said, and even under all of this pressure from the top tiers, there's still a dedicated army of Phoenix Wright loyalists who prove that their character has incredible heart. So, we've made it to the end of our journey. If there's anything I want you, the viewer, to take away from this video, it's that like with any other low tier in Marvel, Phoenix Wright can absolutely put in work. You just have to be talented enough to pull it all off. Whenever I have to play someone crazy enough, and I mean that as a positive term, to select Phoenix Wright on that iconic character select screen, I know that I'm going to potentially be put through the ringer. If you slip up even once and get hit by an objection, your entire team can melt from a few stray hit confirms in neutral, as every space on the screen immediately becomes a no-fly zone. For any newer players who have made it this far and are interested in featuring a lawyer on their Marvel team, I would suggest giving him a shot and seeing how you go. His unorthodox game plan and lack of reach makes him very frustrating to pilot in the beginning, but if you can provide Phoenix with solid support value, the proverbial hill will become less intimidating over time. Phoenix Wright's gameplay strategy and battle mechanics may not be for everyone, but I would be lying if I said I hadn't seen entire rooms light up with excitement when that devastating speech bubble makes contact with an evildoer. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you and your time, and I hope you had fun. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.